Hi everybody, I hope that you are enjoying the snowy day. We spent the morning shoveling off our roof so that our roof wouldn't collapse. So hopefully everybody is safe and sound. I'm going to just take a couple of minutes to introduce you to the assignment for the next 2 weeks, which is using data to make instructional decisions. So we're going to kind of take a break from the comprehensive classroom assessment plan. You've done quite a bit of work on it at this point. I'm providing feedback on it over the next couple of days. And then we're going to let it sit for a minute. We're going to take some time away from it. We're going to do this assignment, the using data to make instructional decisions. And then we'll come back to our comprehensive classroom assessment plan to kind of finalize everything. So this assignment, it's a 40-point assignment, so it's a larger assignment than most, but it's clearly not as large as the comprehensive classroom assessment plan. And I think it's a kind of a fun assignment. I'm hoping it'll be kind of a fun assignment. So for this assignment, the basic overall gist is that you are going to be required to create, administer, evaluate, and then reflect upon a pre and post assessment for some kind of a learning experience. So you're going to identify a learning experience either in your professional setting or in your personal setting. You're going to develop and administer a pre-assessment. You'll look at the data. It'll inform your instruction. Then you'll give the post-assessment, and then you'll look at the combined data and student growth and reflect upon that. So the assignment sheet is posted to Moodle. I'm also going to walk you through the details of the assignment sheet. So what I've done is I've organized it so that the first page kind of lays out the process that you'll be taking. And then the second page lays out what you need to include and what you need to submit. So for your process, the very first thing that you'll need to do is identify a learning experience to assess. This can be anything. I know that it is February break. I know that we're having quite a bit of weather, which is interfering with a lot of what's happening in classrooms. And I know that all of you aren't in classroom settings. So you can be creative with what learning experience it is that you want to assess. Maybe you want to work with students. Maybe you want to work with your players. Maybe you want to work with your dogs as you're teaching them a new trick. Maybe you want to work with teaching somebody in your family or some of your friends rules to a new game. Whatever it is, I don't really care. It's not really important what the learning experience is. What's important is that you're doing pre-assessments, it's informing your instruction, you're doing a post-assessment, and then you're combining and evaluating the overall data. So you'll identify the learning experience. It can be anything. Feel free to be creative. If you have questions about it or want to run something by me, please feel free to. Then you'll name the learning objectives for your learning experience and for your assessment. So again, if it's that you have chosen that you're going to teach your dogs a new trick, the learning objectives will be that my dog Lincoln will successfully come when called 9 out of 10 times without being called more than once. So whatever it is, you identify the learning objectives. You should have a couple. You don't need to have like 20 to 50. Just a couple is all right. Then you're going to use your knowledge of sound assessment design, and you're going to create a pre-test and a post-test. And I strongly recommend that you use the same pre-test as post-test. Your assessment can be selected response, it can be written response, it can be a performance assessment. You can utilize personal communications, you could assess dispositions, whatever it is that you choose to do, you should be originally developing your pre-test and post-test. Then once you've done that, you'll administer your pre-test and collect data. So if I'm trying to train my dogs, I would administer the performance assessment of are they coming when called? And they are probably only coming when called 25% of the time right now, which would be my guess. So I administer that and I collect my data. Then you need to take some time to analyze that data to inform your instruction. And that's going to be key because that comes back up again in the reflective paper. So once you collect that data, give yourself some time to analyze that data so that it informs your instruction. Then you should engage in the learning experience. So whatever it is that you're teaching, teach it, and then administer the post-test. and collect data on the post-test. The next thing that you're going to do is analyze the pre-test, post-test gains. So this is just a rudimentary example of pre-test, post-test gains. You can make it much more complex based on recommendations from the text for record keeping. But this is just out of a score of possible 50 points. Here's the student's pre-test scores, here's the student's post-test scores, and here's the gain or loss over the pre-test, post-test. You'll need to include at least one visual display of pre-test, post-test gains or data. Okay. And then the last piece of this assignment is that you'll write an interpretive essay. And so there's a couple of different prompting questions that you should be paying attention to. So first, after you've initially collected your students' data, how did that change your instruction? I imagine that it will in some way. What surprised you about the pre-assessment? What specific interventions did you use for specific students because of the pretest? You should also explain what gains or losses happened for the class as a whole and for individual students. So what happened as a result of your instruction? What happened as a result of the ways that you changed your instruction? What do you think were the contributing factors that contribute to these gains or lack thereof? And what can the data suggest about the effectiveness of your teaching? And then finally, what could you do differently in the future if you were to administer this in the future? So the outline of your paper, it looks like this. There's kind of 6 different sections. A very short description of your learning experience, like a paragraph, no more. That is not the key piece of this assignment. A list of your learning objectives. I would imagine you'd have somewhere between like 3 and 10. 10 would be a lot for this assignment. An originally developed pre-test or post-test with your key or your scoring guide or your rubric, however you're choosing to score it. Number 4 is kind of tricky. If possible, I'd like you to include scans of the actual pre-test or post-test that's taken or the data sheet that you kept when giving the assignment. Now, you cannot include student names or identifiers on the pre-test, on whatever scans it is. It's a confidentiality issue. So you definitely need to black out any student identifiers on these scans. If, when you check your school's policy, if it's still against confidentiality issues to share the student work in a classroom setting, then skip number 4 entirely. So that's kind of tricky. If you can share it, you should. If you've got some issues, just make sure you communicate them with me because I understand it can be a confidentiality issue. You should include the analysis of your pre-test, post-test gains, and then the 2-page interpretive essay. And here's the scoring guide for this assignment. And it's intended to be kind of a fun way to think about, on a small scale, how does assessment inform your instruction, both after giving a pre-assessment and after looking at pre-test, post-test gains. One thing I do want to point out is that this learning experience that you're doing does not need to be anything super crazy or long. So it can be an individual lesson. It can be like 20 minutes during a practice. It does not have to be like some big, huge, enormous thing. It can be a small thing that you're doing. So if you have questions about any of it, please feel free to email me as you're working. If you're unsure of yourself, feel free to run something by me. I'm giving this to you now. It's not actually due until February 28th. And February 28th is actually a loose deadline for this particular assignment. Because this is dependent upon you working with other people, and because it's February break, and because we've had weather issues, I'm going to be pretty flexible about this deadline. Try for the 28th. If you're not able to make it on the 28th, just make sure that you communicate with me in advance about when your intended turn-in date is for this particular assignment. Good luck with it, and I'm looking forward to reading them.